Hi, everyone, and welcome to Identity Insights by Indicio. This is a show dedicated to bringing you the latest news and education in the digital identity community. Today, I'm joined by Keela Shatzkin to talk about the Cardea project. Thanks so much for making time for me today, Keela. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I am the co-chair of the Cardea Working Group, which is a project under the Linux Foundation, which gives me some insight to be able to participate in today's conversation. I am also of Shatzkin Systems, which is a healthcare IT consulting firm. We are a women-owned business and a family-owned business. And we're sitting at the intersection of healthcare, IT, and operations with specialization in health information exchange, data quality, process engineering, anything IT and healthcare related.
All right, very cool. So would you mind telling us in your own words, what is the Cardea project?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it is a project under the Linux Foundation Public Health, and it's really designed to be a trusted digital ecosystem. I think the really important thing to mention is that it's a framework. And so while we're going to talk about some specific use cases today, the reality is that there is a lot that it can be used for, because it really is just some components that can be then used extensively in other scenarios. And those components that make up the Cardea framework are an issuer agent, so just to talk about that in healthcare terms, that might be a lab, it might be a health information exchange or another healthcare institution, for example. A holder agent, so that is, for example, an app that may live on somebody's phone. It's their wallet for their credentials. And then we have a verifier agent as well. And so in some of the use cases we'll talk about, that may be, for example, an airline if you wanted to travel. It may also be the arrival government that's authenticating your credential. And it includes a couple of other parts that are important. Those include schemas, which are sort of defined credentials that the ecosystem understands how to interpret and are consistent across the network. And then also machine readable governance, which is a really important layer here that allows the ecosystem to do the logic. So for example, a human might read something and say, yes, this looks good, you can come in or do the thing that you want to do. The machine readable governance layer does that for you. So it includes that logic and it removes some of the human error that may exist there. So those are a little bit about the components, and it's built on the Hyperledger Indeed network for its ledger support.
All right, very cool. So just for like an example purpose, how would using Cardea look, right? If I were to try to use it for one of those use cases that you just mentioned, sorry, with like my healthcare records.
Sure. So for example, we can talk about one of the scenarios that Cardea has been used for, and that might be that you want to receive your COVID credentials, right? Cardea was, let's say, seeded out of the COVID pandemic. It, as I've discussed, is not limited to that use case. It's more of a framework, and so it's got a lot of extensibility beyond that specific use case. But let's just say you wanted to receive your vaccine credentials. Instead of on your little white piece of paper, if you live in the US, you want that in a digital and secure format. You could request from your vaccine provider or your other healthcare agencies for that digital credential to be issued to you. That credential can then be shared at your discretion. So you now are in control of that information, and you also have the ability to decide to whom you are sharing it. What's interesting about this ecosystem is that, and the way that the credentials are supported, is that you can choose with whom to share it. You can also decide which data points they may need. So you only need to share the minimum, which is part of the privacy protection layer here. Each of those data points can be shared independently. If they, for example, only need to assess your age, whether you're age qualifying, then that can even not be shared at the detailed level, but it can be mathematically analyzed through a predicate proof. And they don't even need to know your date of birth, right? So in another scenario where you might hand somebody your driver's license, and they now can see your full name and your address and your date of birth and all this personal information in a digital credential, that doesn't need to happen. Some of that logic can live in the machine readable governance and some of that verification step to help protect your information. Did that help answer so sort of half the use case?
No, that was awesome. I think that painted a great picture of what you can really do with the technology. So that's awesome. So what are some of like the long-term goals of Cardea now, right? Like you can use it for these cool things. Are we looking to implement it in a certain way, or like what is the next step that you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a couple of things going on in the Cardea community. First and foremost, obviously, in our day-to-day lives, we've seen a reduction in sort of pandemic restrictions and what the pandemic means on our day-to-day lives. And as I said, that's sort of where we started. And so we're starting to look at what other use cases are really great pivot points for Cardea. And just to touch on a couple of those examples, one is education requirements. So for example, to go to school in the US, you need to provide proof of certain vaccinations. If you want to go to camp, for example, you need to show proof of a meningitis vaccine, right? So those are very transferable examples that have nothing to do with COVID. So our goals for the community are to expand our digital ecosystem, to get more people engaged so that we can start to expand those use cases, and to be able to break down some of the data silos that happen across industry, right? Before the pandemic, there was sort of a lack of acknowledgement that health data was needed in other industries like education, like travel. And I think that this really helps to break down those barriers in a way that maintains privacy and control for the person whose data it is and belongs to.
All right, that's that sounds pretty cool. So if you want to use Cardea, how would you go about doing that? Can you download it now? Would you get in touch with yourself or someone that works on the project? How do you get involved with it?
All of the above. So on Thursdays, we have our Cardea work group. We've split the schedule up for the Thursdays. So the first Thursday of every month is a great beginner entry point. So if you want to learn basics of Cardea, the first Thursday of the month is for you. You can also visit the website that has all of our meetings recorded on there. It has access to the GitHub. So depending on where you are, there's sort of different on-ramps for you. And you can start by just learning about it. And by coming to one of those early sessions, you can dive into the GitHub and start being a data contributor and a code contributor in that repo. Or you can participate in other Thursday meetings. Some of those are more technical, where we're talking about new development, troubleshooting any friction points that may have been identified in the community, and working through those roadmap items. So I would encourage everybody to participate and see how this might be applicable in your specific implementation.
Okay, sounds good. So I know Cardea hosts events from time to time called interopathons, and there's one coming up actually. Would you mind telling me a little bit about what those are and how people can get involved with those?
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is going to be our third Interopathon. It's coming up on June 16th. That is a Thursday. So it stays with our normal schedule, but on an extended invite. So it's from, I believe, 8 a.m. Mountain Time until noon Mountain Time, if I'm not mistaken. And the goals of the Interopathons are to help establish the benefit of interop work, right? And trying to break down some of those barriers, both in people trying to engage with the code, but also in people engaging with each other in the ecosystem. So we're bringing together different participants. We're not only testing against the reference code that is available through Cardea, but also with each other. And that's really exciting to help drive interop. But also, of course, like any testing process and new code, there's friction points. And so the goal is to find them so that we can improve them moving forward. So we've had some great success with interopathons. It's also open for those people who may just want to listen and start to understand how the code works, some of the use cases. It's a great opportunity if you're a little bit more technical to participate and see what's going on between parties.
All right, awesome. And do you need to show up with anything? Like, do you need your own app or anything to participate, or what does it take to show up that you would need?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to engage. So what we've done for this Interopathon is try to segment the different components of the Cardea ecosystem so that if you have a component of it and you only want to engage in that section, then you can. And we've isolated those into atomic tests so that each person, assuming you can complete the connectivity portion, you could then engage on any one of the many components that create Cardea. The way to decide if you are a good participant or whether you'd be better as just an attendee and a listener is to visit the Cardea website. It's cardea.app, and we'll make sure that you guys have that information so that you can review the submission form and decide how you may be ready to participate.
All right. Awesome. Sounds good. It looks like we are just about out of time. So thank you so much again for joining me today, Keela. It's been awesome learning all about Cardea and how to really get involved with the program. If you want to learn more about the Cardea project, we will absolutely have that link down in the description, as well as a link to the Cardea Interopathon, so you can learn a little bit more about that. And if you want to get engaged, we encourage you to come check it out. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to learn a little bit more about, please leave a comment below and we'll be sure to review them. Thanks again, Keela. Is there anything that you'd like to plug before we go?
No, I think we've already talked about the Interopathon, so we look forward to seeing you there. If that's a little intimidating for you, again, the first Thursday of the month is a great way to start. We're trying to reduce barriers to entry and bring more people into this community. We're really excited to have you. If you are involved in healthcare, I can almost guarantee that there's a way that Cardea can help that help that solution, whether it's provider credentialing or health for education, school, work requirements. There's so many use cases that we haven't even delved into yet. So it's very exciting and has a lot of promise. I hope that you'll participate.